The Great War ended, but the silence felt wrong. When Arya Stark drove the Valyrian steel blade into the Night King's chest, the horde shattered into harmless dust. Yet, as the living celebrated among the ruins of Winterfell, Jon Snow stood frozen in the courtyard. Beneath his leather tunic, where the Night King had grasped his shoulder, a spiral pattern of pale blue frost began to spread across his skin. He told no one, but that night, the nightmares began. Jon didn't dream of fire or dragons. He dreamed of an endless, silent waste beneath an icy star. Every time he slept, he felt a strange, cold pulse calling to him from the far north. The magic that created the First Other had not died. It had simply sought a new host, one born of fire and ice, capable of containing its true power. As days turned to weeks, the cold inside Jon grew stronger. Water froze in his cup whenever he touched it. His heartbeat slowed to an agonizingly long pause between thumps. Bran Stark sat beneath the weirwood tree, his milky eyes staring at Jon with quiet dread. "The wheel isn't broken, Jon," Bran whispered, his voice trembling for the first time. "It's turning back toward the beginning." Before Jon could demand answers, a sudden shadow fell over Winterfell. Drogon let out an agonizing screech from the sky. Down below, the direwolf ghost stood outside Jon's quarters, howling at a sudden, unnatural blizzard creeping down from the mountains. It wasn't autumn. Something far darker had awakened within the blood of Targaryen and Stark, and it was demanding its tribute. By the time the royal procession reached the neck on their march south, Jon's condition could no longer be hidden. His irises had shifted from dark gray to a vivid, luminous violet blue. Daenerys Targaryen watched him with growing suspicion. She had seen strange magic in Essos, but the aura radiating from Jon was ancient and predatory. "You're hiding something from me, Jon," Daenerys said, her hand resting near the hilt of her dagger inside her war tent. Outside, the night air had dropped well below freezing, an impossibility for the Riverlands. "Ever since Winterfell, you look at me as if I am a stranger." "I am protecting you," Jon replied, his voice sounding hollow, like wind rushing through a cave. "There is a song in my head, Dany. A song of winter that never ends." That night, a mysterious murder shook the camp. Lord Varys was found dead in his quarters, completely unblemished except for his eyes, which had turned to solid ice. Suspicion immediately fell upon the Northmen, but Lord Tyrion discovered something far stranger at the crime scene. Written in frost on the table was an ancient symbol, the same spiral pattern left by the Children of the Forest. Panic spread through the Targaryen ranks like wildfire. Daenerys demanded answers, suspecting treason or dark sorcery. But as she confronted Jon in front of the Northern Lords, a blood-curdling sound echoed from the treeline. It wasn't a dragon's roar or a battle cry. It was the synchronized, heavy footfalls of an unseen army marching through the fog, stepping in time with the slow, unnatural beating of Jon Snow's frozen heart. The march to King's Landing became a nightmare of paranoia. With every mile they traveled south, the unnatural winter followed them, leaving a trail of frozen rivers and dying crops. Daenerys's dragons grew restless, refusing to fly near Jon. Tyrion Lannister desperately tried to maintain the alliance, but the whispers among the soldiers grew louder. "The bastard of Winterfell is cursed." Upon reaching the capital, Cersei Lannister awaited them behind the massive walls of the Red Keep, backed by the Golden Company. But the impending clash between armies was derailed by an ominous event. As the sun reached its peak, a shadow fell over the city, and snow began to fall over the Red Keep for the first time in recorded history. Jon walked to the front of the combined army, ignoring the shouts of Grey Worm and Daenerys. Cersei ordered her scorpion ballistas to fire upon him. A massive iron bolt hissed through the sky, aiming straight for Jon's chest. Instead of piercing him, the iron bolt stopped dead in midair a foot away from Jon's body, instantly encasing itself in thick frost before shattering into harmless shards. The entire battlefield fell into a terrified silence. Jon turned toward Daenerys, his glowing eyes filled with a terrifying, ancient sorrow. "The Iron Throne was forged in dragonfire," Jon said, his voice echoing across the valley so loudly that even Cersei heard it from her high tower. "But it will be claimed by ice." With a simple wave of his hand, the iron gates of King's Landing cracked violently down the center, freezing into brittle glass before collapsing into 1,000 pieces. Inside the city, madness erupted. Cersei's mercenaries dropped their weapons, refusing to fight a man who could command winter itself. Daenerys landed Drogon in the courtyard, her face pale with fury and betrayal. She realized that the greatest threat to her dream was not Cersei, but the man she had loved. "I came to break the wheel," Daenerys screamed over the howling wind, her dragon raising its neck, fire building in its throat. "I will not let you turn this realm into a graveyard. The wheel cannot be broken by fire." "Dany," Jon whispered softly, stepping toward her. "Fire only consumes until there is nothing left. Ice preserves. Ice brings quiet." Drogon unleashed a massive torrent of dragonfire directly at Jon. The red-orange flames engulfed him completely, blinding everyone in the courtyard. Daenerys watched, expecting to see ashes. But as the fire cleared, Jon was untouched. The Targaryen blood in his veins shielded him from the heat, while the magic of the Great Other absorbed the energy, turning the dragonfire into a pale, blinding blue flame. Jon raised his hand toward the great beast. The blue flames swirled around Drogon, locking the dragon's massive jaw shut with heavy bands of magical frost. Daenerys gasped as her dragon collapsed to its knees, unable to breathe fire. Cersei fled deep into the subterranean vaults beneath the Red Keep, realization finally dawning on her. The war for the throne was over, but the war for survival had just begun. Jon walked slowly into the throne room, leaving glowing, frosty footprints on the ancient stone floor. In the dark subterranean tunnels beneath the city, Cersei tried to reach the caches of wildfire, desperate to destroy the Red Keep and everything in it. But as her guards reached for the green liquid, they found the barrels completely frozen solid, the magical fire rendered harmless by the absolute zero temperature enveloping the castle. Up in the Great Hall, Jon stood before the Iron Throne. Daenerys stumbled into the room, drawing her Valyrian steel dagger. She loved him, but she could not allow an eternal night to swallow the world. "Jon, please," she wept, the tears freezing on her cheeks before they could fall. "Fight it. Remember who you are. You are Aegon Targaryen, the rightful king." "Aegon is dead," Jon replied, touching the cold iron of the throne. "And Jon Snow was just a shadow. The realm doesn't need a king who bleeds. It needs a king who cannot feel pain." Daenerys lunged forward, plunging the dagger into his chest. But there was no blood. The blade snapped like brittled twig against his heart. Jon looked at her with profound sadness, leaning forward to press his freezing forehead against hers. A gentle wave of frost washed over Daenerys. The rage, the ambition, and the pain in her eyes faded, replaced by a calm, peaceful trance as her skin turned pale alabaster and her eyes lit up with brilliant blue light. She did not die, she was transformed. Hand in hand, the Dragon Queen and the King of Frost turned to face the entrance of the hall as the doors burst open. Bran Stark watched the entire scene from the Weirwood Grove in Winterfell, his body trembling in his wooden chair. Tyrion, Sansa, and Samwell Tarly stood around him, desperate for news from the south. "Is the war over?" Sansa demanded, her voice shaking against the rising wind. "Did Daenerys take the city?" Bran lowered his head, tears of sap dripping from the weirwood tree behind him. "The war for the throne is over," Bran murmured. "The realm of men has ended." Through his vision, Bran saw the truth. Jon Snow sat upon the Iron Throne, completely encased in a shimmering armor of clear ice. Beside him stood Daenerys, his icy queen. Below them, the people of King's Landing did not bleed or suffer. They moved in eerie, perfect harmony, freed from hunger, fear, and ambition under the rule of the Frost King. The winter did not stay in the south. A wall of mist and ice began expanding outward from King's Landing, moving steadily toward the Reach, the Riverlands, and eventually the north. It was not a violent destruction, but an inevitable, peaceful freeze that lulled the entire continent into a dreamless sleep. On the Iron Throne, Jon closed his eyes. Longclaw, now a blade of glowing pale frost, rested across his knees. Westeros was finally united, free from political intrigue, war, and betrayal. The realm was silent at last, locked inside an eternal winter that no sun would ever warm again.